Holy crap, everyone's dead! There's no tension. How's it going, YouTube lovers? This is the Gibble Anime. Welcome back to another edition of Eabs Book Club, where today I'm here to review the 5th issue of the Murder Drones graphic novel, which is going to be adapting my favorite episode of the show, Episode 7, Mass Destruction. I apologize for getting to this a little bit late. Splatoon Raiders dropped the same weekend I was going to be working on this, and I just got completely sucked into playing that game for hours. It's incredibly addicting. But anyway, here to talk about the comic, of course. Let's focus on that. I'm very curious going into this one because, you know, last one I thought was actually pretty solid. I think it fixed a lot of issues. It still had its own issues, of course, this whole comic series has, but I thought it fixed a lot of problems. And you know what? V is not in this particular story, so maybe Wyatt Kennedy can actually write it pretty well, because for some reason he seems to hate her. But anyway, Wyatt Kennedy is writing this again. Like I said, he's writing all of these, but there's a different artist who illustrated all the panels in this one. And I apologize if I mispronounce this. I think the name is French. This artist's name is Gigi Dutro. I am so sorry if I messed that up. I'm American. Obviously, I don't know how to pronounce anything. But what's cool about this artist is that they've actually worked on larger properties and IPs, such as Sonic's IDW run and also stuff with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So it's pretty cool to see someone, you know, whose name is around these massive properties working on this silly little indie animated thing. So that part is cool, at least, and we'll get to see brand new art style going into this comic. But like I said, it is my favorite episode of the show that it is adapting. Not only that, but it is probably the craziest episode of the show, with lore drops and big reveals and crazy action and horror. It is a nuts episode, so there's going to be a lot that goes on. It's going to be a bit of a longer video today, I'm pretty sure, just because this script is probably the longest I've written for any of these Murder Drones reviews. But let's go ahead and jump into this, because once again, I'm going to be splitting this review into 3 parts like I always do for these comics. First, I'm going to cover just a kind of a recap, in-depth recap of the plot that it follows and how it goes along with the show and everything. Then I'm going to talk about the stuff that I didn't like, and oh boy, there's stuff I didn't like in this one. And then finally, because I like to end on a positive note, I'll talk about something that I did like. So there you go. That's the plan for today. And once again, before we get into this, I'm going to start with a spoiler warning and an opinion warning. I will be talking about the plot of both the comic and the show that it is adapting. So spoiler warning, of course, and an opinion warning, just because I'm going to be giving my own personal opinions on this. You may not agree with it. I really don't care. But anyway, let's go ahead and jump into this and review this comic. Once again, as all of these comics since the first one have done, it starts off with a text-style exchange between Uzi and N to serve as a recap for the readers of what happened in the previous one. Unlike a couple of the last ones we got, there's no like super clever tie-in to what happens next or any kind of like clever joke or inside humor or anything like that. So we're just going to kind of brush past this and get to the real part of the comic, which opens with a flashback. How we start with a flashback to when Copper 9 was still inhabited by humans, and we see Nori, Uzi's mom, being experimented on because the humans are trying to cleanse her of her possession by the Solver, because the Solver is trying to take control. Nori's eyes are not purple like they're supposed to be. They are lit up yellow. So one of the scientists sends another one to go get Yeva. This scientist who's sent on this mission, he's actually an intern. He just is giving way too much responsibility here because he actually grabbed the wrong name tag for his coat. Everyone thinks that he's Dr. Chambers. He's just Mitchell the intern. But anyway, Mitchell goes and finds Yeva, who is Doll's mom, because they're like, we need help to be able to contain Nori so that we can go ahead and use this patch that we have to basically exorcise her of the Solver's possession. So he goes and he gets Yeva and he brings her back, but by the time he gets back, everyone's dead. Every one of his constituents is already dead. The Solver has slaughtered all of them. Well, one is still alive, who, fun fact, in the show is clearly named Ridley, which is a reference to the character from Alien, which is a wonderful nod because the show loves its horror references. She's still alive for about 5 seconds before the Solver grabs her and pulls her into this giant hole that it made into the ground and kills her. And then after that, the Solver, possessing Nori's body, rises up out of the hole, and Well, the intern's in some trouble because he has something that can help. He has a USB stick styled like a crucifix, which has the patch that can get rid of the solver. But he's not going to be able to use it because the solver takes it from him, spins it around, and chucks it right at his head. But that's where the flashback here ends, because it turns out that flashback that we were watching was actually like basically a video recording playback from a camera on Mitchell's mask that he was wearing with his suit, and it was being watched by this mysterious little head crab thing. It's a little heart, crawling around like this, little crab thing. We've seen it a couple of times in this series, but this one has purple eyes. Interesting, huh? But anyway, that's back in present day that we're seeing this heart crab. Also in present day, Uzi, En, and Tessa finally crash at the bottom of the elevator and they survive the fall, but collapsing rocks block their way back up and block the way up to where they last saw V. Uzi also is looking worse for wear because blood, actual blood, not oil, is pouring out of a crack in her face visor. So she is not doing well. Tessa wants to leave Uzi behind, and En is trying to just soothe her in it because, he knows Tessa. She's basically like his mom because she's the one who reactivated and reassembled all the drones from his squad. But at the same time, he loves Uzi and doesn't want anything to hurt her. So, and she's like, no. It's going to be okay, Uzi. There's going to be stuff here you might not want to see. But then he accidentally says out loud, "We're not going to hurt you," which immediately rightfully so, throws up red flags for Uzi, who freaks out and subconsciously creates like a little null singularity in her hand, which detonates and it collapses the tunnel, separating her from the rest of her friends. So, yep, there you go. Immediately, we do the one thing you're not supposed to do in horror films. We split up. Immediately, our characters are split up. But we don't get to see what happens to them next because we cut to back on the surface with Lizzie and Thad, our popular cheerleader girl and the popular jock from the high school. They're heading actually to the murder drone's home spire, but Lizzie is refusing to tell Thad why. She's just like, yeah, no, secrets of blackmail, I'm not telling you. But on their way there, the gravitational pull of the planet suddenly kind of hiccups. They just start floating up into the air before they slam back into the ground and gravity goes back to normal. And even then, they don't even have time to process this because then they see a murder drone's landing pod fly overhead, beat them to the spire, and out of it flies Jay. We haven't seen her in a bit since the beginning of the last comic, but now she is there at this spire. And you know what? The comic is going to keep jumping around like this because we leave this scene again right here. We're just going to keep jumping. A lot of these sequences are a bunch of short little bites. So before I go on, I want to take a moment to comment on the art style of this comic. This is the third artist that has worked on the panel art for this series, and it's interesting. I don't really like it or dislike it particularly, so that's why I'm not talking about this in like the final two sections here, because I actually really like how, in particular, it's colored. I feel like a lot of the panels, like the dramatic lighting effect that it gives and the colors of the light, really do feel like they match the aesthetic and the tone of what we see in the show, like the big dramatic, church underground being used as a lab, or a flashback that we get with En a little bit later. Those panels straight up look like they're redrawn versions of the show in a really, really good way. I like that. What I don't like about it, though, is that the characters themselves are drawn kind of weird. They feel short and stumpy. Like, I know Uzi's supposed to be short, but even En at times feels short, and he's supposed to be the tallest one of all of them. So it just feels really weird, like short and stumpy. And everyone's faces are, like, I know that, they have rounded off faces, but their heads feel like they're just straight up round balls with like more simplistic design choices on there. It just, I don't know, it feels weird and almost changes the look of everyone's expression in the comic in a way that's detrimental to how the designs worked in the show. So I don't know. I don't have the same problems I had with like the home art style where there were just straight up errors and issues with it. But this one just feels weird. I don't quite get, it was kind of weird to look at because I'm like, this feels almost like a chibi version of these characters. What is going on? But anyway, mini rant about the art style done. Let's get back to the story, because in the bunker, En wakes up, find himself pinned under the rubble from when the tunnel collapsed. Also, Tessa's gone too. So everyone is split up right now. No Uzi, no Tessa, En is by himself. But he hears a familiar giggle in the distance. It's V's voice. He knows there's no way that could be her, because the last time he saw V, a bunch of anti-drone sentinels that have already ripped apart a bunch of murder drones were closing in on her. And so he's like trying to desperately free himself from the rubble because he knows whatever this is not good. But he's too slow, and a tentacle from the solver reaches out, grabs him, and rips his arm off to get him out of the rubble. And it pulls him right into the arms of Sin. And when she grabs him and hugs him, his mind like flashes back to his early days as a murder drone, and we see the truth. He and his squad and a lot of the other murder drones that Sin made were responsible for the slaughter of humans on Earth before Sin destroyed the planet. Again, like I said, that shot is taken straight from the show, and it looks really good. But yeah, that is the truth. The reason they're murder drones is not because they're killing robots. It's because they straight up murdered people. They killed the entire population of Earth, or at least huge chunks of it, to allow Sin little to no resistance to do her thing to destroy the planet. Which is crazy, but you look at it, that's basically what he was doing here on Copper 9 with all the drones. So Sin thanks him for clearing the way on Earth and now Copper 9. And then she drags him away into the darkness saying, let's eat. Because her plan is almost complete. And as he's being dragged away, I'm going to do a little bit out of order from how the comic does it here, just because I feel like it's easier to describe this way. As N is being dragged away into the tunnels, he is saved. A pickaxe slams down and chops through the tentacle and saves him. And it turns out it's the heart crab that we saw earlier, that we, the readers, saw. This is the first time N or any of the other characters have seen her, but this is the second time that we, the readers, have seen her. And it actually has the USB crucifix that we saw also in the flashback at the beginning. So it already found it. And the heart then talks to N. And she's like, come on, we gotta go. And the monster is chasing them. You could hear the solver. There's like weird mass of writhing tentacles going after them. And she says, we need to get this crucifix to the surface. And she says that she's looking for a, quote, hunk named Khan. And that is a pretty big indication to both the readers and to N. This is Uzi's mom. Or at least what's left of her. She no longer has her drone body, but it turns out the murder drones that attacked her, who I'm pretty sure in the show is implied heavily to have been N himself, but it still has her heart, so she's still alive. The drone body may have been destroyed, but the heart lived on. And so there you go. That's our big twist right there. Uzi's mom is alive. Well, I say the big twist. The big twist for now. This story is not done with them yet, because the chaos is not slowing down. Because back on the surface, Jay, remember, she flew into the spire ahead of Thad and Lizzie. Before the two can get in there and see what she's doing, she blows up the first landing pod that, her and her squad have been using as a base this whole time after landing. And then she just flies back off in the newer one that she arrived in with Tessa. No word, no nothing, no even acknowledgement that Thad and Lizzie were there if she even saw them. She just did her job and left. But this is also when Khan catches up to Thad and Lizzie. Yeah, Uzi's dad is just here now. And he's actually got Uzi's railgun with him, and he's looking for the part that she looked for when she first went to the spire at the beginning of this story. We kind of get a like father, like daughter moment there, which is nice considering that, they hardly seem alike in a lot of ways other than being mechanically inclined. But seeing him actually trek out there and go find the piece, it's kind of a nice parallel to the first episode. But anyway, he also claims that when he says we got to find this part, he also claims that according to the insane scrawlings left by his wife, Nori, the planet is going to try to eat them soon. He says after there's another gravity hiccup that throws them into the air and drops them back down. Yeah, no, even with no context, I don't blame the two high schoolers that he's talking to for being confused by this. He's like, the planet's going to eat us soon. What the heck does that mean? What? It's a planet. But unfortunately, he and also Nori, of course, because she wrote it, are right. And they are running out of time. But anyway, back underground, because like I said, this jumps around a lot. Tessa, we finally catch up with her. We see where she went after she left N. And she finds herself a computer that's in a room where all the experimented on worker drones are being kept. This is where Mitchell the intern found Yeva during the flashback at the beginning of the comic. All these lockers that they locked him up in, there's the computer at the far end of it. She goes up to the computer, presses some buttons, and activates a self-destruct sequence, and then walks out of the room as it explodes, destroying everything inside. Because, cool guys don't look at explosions. That's true, and apparently Tessa knows this as well. But immediately after this explosion, she's jumped by Doll, who's wielding a knife. Again, because that's what Doll does. And Doll is demanding to know where the USB crucifix is, because she knows that it is a patch that can be used to exorcise the solver's possession out of a drone, because it's basically the same thing that happened to her mom. The problem is she notices something strange. Tessa didn't really seem to know about that. She just said she had her suspicions. And Doll's like, well, why wouldn't you, the human, know about this thing that the humans were doing? But Tessa, of course, doesn't answer. Instead, she manages to slip away from Doll into the darkness. But Doll then hears a noise that tells her she's not alone. She may have just watched the only one she thought was nearby leave, but she's not alone. She hears weird skittering and screeching sounds in the darkness. And the last thing she sees is a face lunging at her from that darkness. Again, like I said, there's a lot more leaning into the horror elements of this one, and I'm pretty sure that in the script of the original episode, Liam even said that this moment is straight up FNAF's The Camera is the phrase that he used. So it was absolutely meant to be like the Foxy or Puppet jump scare from FNAF 2, which I appreciate that. I mean, there's a pretty sure there's a number 87 somewhere in this comic and in the show as well that probably is there to be the bite of 87. But anyway, after we see this all happen to Doll, we actually go get the rest of the flashback. Because remember, it cut off because of the camera when the crucifix was being flung at the intern's face. But now we get to see the rest of it because Nori is telling the story to N. So Yeva actually managed to step in and save the intern's life using her own solver powers, stopping the crucifix before it crashed into his helmet. And then she flings it back at Nori, and it goes into Nori's face and starts applying the patch, giving her a chance to break free of the solver. But the solver is still fighting this, trying to fight to stay in there. The virus is fighting the antivirus, basically. And there's like a null forming on Nori's hand, a little sphere, a little void. And so what Yeva does is slices off Nori's hand and go, here you go, just cut off the bad part, get rid of it, you can regenerate your hand, we're all good to go. Except they're not, because the null falls into the hole that was behind her, and it detonates when it gets to the planet's core and just collapses half of the planet. And that was what the big, apocalyptic event was that caused the destruction of Copper 9 and the death of every human on that planet. It was the solver when it was forced out of Nori's body. So Nori explains this all to N and everything that's going on. But after she learns from N that Uzi, her daughter, and Doll, her former friend's daughter, I say former as in late, I should say, not former as in they're not no longer friends, but late friend because V killed her earlier. After hearing that Uzi and Doll are the new hosts, Nori sends N away with the crucifix and is like, you need to get this out of here. You need to be able to patch them so that the solver can't do anything. And she tries to make N promise. Do not tell my daughter that I'm alive. I ruined her life. Do not tell her that I'm alive. But N is like, no, I'm not going to keep secrets from her anymore. I promise to not tell her, though, until you tell her yourself. And to that, Nori says, bite me, because mother and daughter are truly alike. But anyway, during all of this going on with N meeting with Nori and with the interaction between Doll and Tessa, Uzi has been on her own. She's been searching the caves, and she comes across the aftermath of where her mom was experimented on, as we saw in the flashback. She looks around the building, an old church that's underground, because of course it was. And in the show, they actually have a detail that explains, yeah, no, we didn't even build it like that for any kind of irony. This was already here somehow. But anyway, she looks around and she finds that there's a wall of monitors at a desk, and the monitors are still turned on. And it turns out this is where her mom was watching the security tape at the beginning of the comic. And so Uzi rewinds it and she watches it, but because it cuts off at the end, all she sees is the fact that her mom was the monster that killed all the humans here. She doesn't see any of the other stuff that happens after that and how her mom was saved, just the destruction that her mom causes. But before she can even process this, which, is a lot, this is the first she's actually seen anything of her mom, Doll then shows up, and she is looking awful. She is dying from the attack that she suffered in the tunnels, and all she can do is just blink Russian text on her face, which when translated reads, fight back. But of course, it is at this moment that Tessa arrives on the scene. Finally catching up to Uzi, she blames Uzi for killing Doll, and she pins Uzi to the floor and just sticks her sword, because she's been carrying that around since the gala, sticks the sword down into Uzi's chest and starts like pushing it down, getting ready to just crush Uzi's core and kill her. But that's when N steps in. He is finally caught up as well, and he takes out his own blade and he holds it at Tessa's throat and he says, "You have one chance to tell me the truth. Did you know that this patch was down here? Yes or no?" But instead of just answering the question, Tessa tries to sweet talk her way out of the interaction with N, and so N makes good on his promise in one of the best moments of his character development, and without hesitation, slices through Tessa's neck and leaves her head separated from her body, rolling on the ground. Good for him. He finally stood up for himself, one time. Of course, it was, to kill seemingly, I'm going to say at this point, seemingly, because we're not done with this yet, seemingly kill the woman who was basically his mother. But he followed through on it. You got to give serious credit to N for that. But then he turns to Uzi and he's like, "Look, I promise we're going to figure out how to use this USB. We're going to get through this together." The problem is Uzi's not in there right now. She has been fully possessed by the solver, which giggles as it crushes N's hand and then also destroys the crucifix. So there goes the chance of using the patch right there as the saving grace. And then it's going to kill N. But now Nori has actually decided she's going to fight. She caught up and she blocks the solver, and a big fight breaks out. N and Nori versus the solver possessing Uzi. And they're working together and fighting against the possessed girl, and their big epic fight breaks out. But at one point, Nori gets actually pretty close to landing a pretty deadly blow on Uzi, but N doesn't want to hurt Uzi. He's just trying to get her to snap out of it. He's trying to protect her. And so he throws himself in front of the attack and protects her. And the good news is, in that moment, he sees a brief flicker of purple in Uzi's eyes return. It looks like she is in there and fighting. But now N is, injured and on the ground, and the solver goes and grabs Nori and is going to eat her heart and kill her. But then N calls out, and as his distraction, basically distraction to everyone, he writes out in his own ink with his disembodied hand on the ground, "Uzi and I are hanging out," I guess. Basically, he's admitting to the fact that they've basically been dating this entire time. So Nori is like, "What the heck, Uzi? These things literally killed your mother. What is wrong with you?" And that is enough for Uzi to actually break out of the solver's possession, because she is an angsty, emo little gremlin goblin. She will never miss an opportunity to be rebellious against someone who tells her what she has to do. She breaks out of the solver's possession, and she's like, "No, you don't own me, you don't frickin' own me, lady." And she punts her mom into the hole. She didn't know it was her mom until N spills the beans right there. But she goes to N, they freak out and they embrace, because they have been through a lot. And they're about to go through more, because Tessa's body gets back up and puts its head back on. That's right. Because it turns out Tessa's been dead this whole time. This entity takes off the spacesuit that I was wearing the whole time that obscured its body, and reveals itself to be Sin, the drone body of Sin, wearing Tessa as a skin suit, entered in Michael Afton style, like Five Nights at Freddy's. See, there's yet another Five Nights at Freddy's reference in this particular story. And then after that, after making her presence known, she drops herself into the hole in the ground, and then a bunch of massive tentacles shoot up from the hole behind her and grab Uzi and N and start dragging them into the hole to finish them off. But Uzi makes a sacrifice here. She forces N away, freeing him, pushing him away, while she lets herself be dragged into the hole by the solver, and everything cuts to black. But that's not the end. She opens her eyes, and she finds herself floating in space, with Copper 9, the planet, being destroyed below her. Whew, like I said, that was a long one. A lot happens in this. So much happens, and the comic really tries to go over everything. I give it credit. It is trying to hit all the major points. But there's just a lot here. I feel like all these they either needed to split this up into more graphic novels. The fact that they weren't even going to have the home special before makes me think the pacing would have been even worse at the time. But they needed more graphic novels, or they needed longer graphic novels for this series, because this was just so much going on. But again, Mass Destruction is my favorite episode of the show, so I was very excited and nervous to read this comic, and now that I've read it, I will say I'm a bit disappointed, actually very disappointed, by this comic's adaptation of that episode. So let's go over the issues that I have with this comic, because there are two pretty major ones here. First of which I kind of alluded to there, pacing. Now again, I'm not going to pretend like pacing is perfect in the show. It's not. It's far from it. But it's really, really, really noticeable in the comic because it skips around so much, like I said, which is what the episode does, but the episode has time to go over it. The comic skips over everything so many times that some sequences only get like a panel or two when they're full scenes in the show. Which guts any depth or any kind of substance that these scenes had. Here's some of these gutted sequences. I wrote down a few examples here. So N's nightmare flashback to Earth that I was talking about. You know, remember I said like the frame that you get is like, oh my gosh, the lighting and everything, it looks just like it did in the show. Well, it's good that it looked good because that's all we get. That nightmare sequence that shows, you know, the death of the humans as the murder drones are, you know, skittering across the ground and jumping people, and the Solver's tentacles are taking out helicopters. That's reduced to one panel. Just a single frame is all we get with no context of what's going on. That's it. And then also another thing that comes up is Sin. I'm not going to call her Tessa anymore now that the reveal's been done. When Sin destroys the lab's servers, the reason she did that in the show is because she wanted to just get rid of any of the data there. But she also checked first to see, okay, which drones are actually, you know, infected by Solver powers, which ones are a threat to my power. And she looks at it and she just sees Nori and Yeva. Okay, so it's just them who are dead, assumingly dead at this point, because, you know, Nori's not, and their daughters. Good, I got it. And then she blows everything up. She uses it for information. She doesn't get any info on the infected drones, though, in the comic. She just goes up and goes, self-destruct, boom, we're done. It just completely just ruins what the point of that scene was. And then also, Doll's death in multiple ways is really not great. There's barely any tension when she gets jumped in the tunnel. It's, like I said, because they don't have time to build up tension. There's like a couple panels of her looking around, and then she gets jumped. And it's not even really clear that she dies when she like crawls her way to Uzi with like her last bit of power. It's just like she's there, and then she's just not there. And you're like, oh, wait, she died? I don't even know that happened. It's not clear at all. But then I think that the last section I want to bring up here is Sin's like big dramatic reveal that she's been Tessa this whole time. And I want to talk about this more in my second section, like my second issue with the comic, like the latter half of this section here. But it's hard to defend when the way the show does it makes it not even clear. Like, look at this. I'm actually going to show you a panel. Look at this. What is even happening here? Like, especially that last panel. What is this? It looks like when Spherus Magna was being reformed in the Bionicle comics, which honestly was a terrible interpretation of that scene ever. Anyway, the Mount Nui Chronicles did a much better job with the art on that. I don't even know what's happening here. It's just, this comic is so confusing because it jumps around so much and doesn't give any depth to the scene that goes to. Honestly, the way that I explained it here, where we just stayed with N for a long time and then we looked at Uzi for a while, that would have been better pacing. Like, I know it's different from the show, but when you're doing it in a written comic form like this, I feel like you need to group things up a little bit more to make it easier to understand, so you have longer sequences of what's going on instead of jumping around quickly, and you have to like juggle your brain between 4 different scenes, because there's like 4 different locations we go to in this comic. Oh my gosh. But it even makes it worse when, like I said, there's so much jumping around. Some of the sequences, even when they are put together, feel like they're almost out of order. Like at the beginning, there's this text, you know, big comic style text that goes wham. And I can't tell what this is supposed to be. I thought like at first, oh, is that the sound of the elevator crashing? But it's put after we see them already landed with the elevator. So it can't be that. And so I'm like, oh, is that supposed to be like Uzi, you know, splitting the rock or stopping it when N is digging through and he's not paying attention and almost throws a rock at Uzi's head? Maybe that's probably what it's supposed to be, but the problem is the way that the panel looks, I can't tell that N is throwing anything, and the split rock that Uzi's holding is so blended into the background that I have no idea what's going on. So this wham right here feels like it's out of place. My first thought is that's the elevator sound, but playing after they've already crashed for some reason. I just don't get it. And then also towards the end, it seems like En's reaction to Nori throwing her pickaxe at possessed Uzi happens twice. Like in the panel where we initially see her throwing the pickaxe, he goes, "No!" with like a lot of O's. It's big and dramatic. But then 2 panels later, on the same page, he goes, "Wait, no!" And then he goes and protects her. He reacts twice. Like, make up your mind, En. When did you see the weapon being thrown at your girlfriend? It's so weird. It's like there's jumbled up scenes, duplicate versions of reactions. It's so hard to follow. This comic is already so confusing the way it jumps between scenes, and then the scenes themselves are still jumbled up. It's really hard to understand. Even as someone who knows the story, I was like, okay, what is happening here? I'm very confused. But yeah, that's my first issue with it, is the overall pacing and story structure here. But my second issue has to do with the overall tone and how it distracts from Sin's big reveal. So Murder Drones has always had an odd tone. I know that. It is a horror comedy, but it is still a horror series. Liam loves those creepy visuals. I've seen plenty of his... I have more stuff to watch, but I've seen all of his animated stuff at this point. He loves those creepy visuals. But I also know that for some publishing reason, I'll admit, this comic series has shied from most of the non-oil gore of the series, because they're like, we're not just going to make this thing, splatting blood everywhere. We're not doing that. Okay, fine. I can accept that. But the problem is they went way too far with censoring everything in this one. Like, yeah, maybe a little bit of censoring here and there, but this is like really too far to the point that it detracts from the impact of the comic. So, especially because Sin's reveal is the most horrifying thing in this show. Like, it's so horrifying that it's the thing that caused Liam to rewrite the series. He thought of the idea of this, spooky robot corpse reveal and went, that's now the catalyst to the series. Everything hinges on that. And he basically scrapped episode 2 and completely rewrote the series after that. That's why it's probably one of the reasons episode 2 took so long to come out, is because he scrapped everything. But this comic here, which should be the scariest moment of the series, well, one of the scariest, it's not even horrifying. There's nothing with any tension about it. Like, even, okay, I'll talk about the Sin thing in a moment, but even during the flashback to the scientists and Nori, they ruin the tension of that scene. We don't, because in the show, when Mitchell comes back with Yeva and he first goes back into the church, everything looks fine, because Sin and the Solver, not even Sin at this point, just the Solver, they're kind of separate, kind of the same, but the Solver is projecting a happy, look, everything's fine scenario. We stop Nori, we're all good, get over here. That's what it's using its holograms to trick Mitchell into, but he notices something's wrong and he's on edge, and then he notices like Dr. Chambers on... No, he's Dr. Chambers, my bad. He notices Dr. Ridley on the side, missing her arm, and then she gets dragged away. It is a wonderfully horrifying scene as you realize, oh crap, none of this is real. In the comic, however, there's no hologram. He just walks in and goes, wow, holy crap, everyone's dead. There's no tension. There's no scary. Like, even when possessed Nori rises up out of the hole in the show, she has a skull in her hand and crushes it. And I believe with the hat on it, it's implied that that's Ridley's skull, meaning she just ripped it out of Ridley's body. But there's no skull in this bit. There's nothing there. She just shows up and goes, give me the crucifix, lol. And also the hole that she rises out of, it's supposed to be a creepy flesh hole. It doesn't look like flesh. It's colored like dirt. It just looks like it looks like a sarlacc pit because it's brown with like little teeth. It just looks like it looks like a sarlacc pit. It doesn't look horrifying. It's, oh my gosh. And even like all the tunnels that are supposed to be, like basically the body of that this creature has built down here. It's just dirt. There's no sense that, oh my gosh, we might be inside the creature. It's become the planet. No, it's just dirt. Which makes Khan's line about the planet's going to eat us soon make even less sense, because the silver kind of becomes the planet leading up to when it cracks it open like an egg. But that doesn't happen here. It just doesn't make any sense. But like I said, the worst part of this tone change is with Sin herself. So right off the bat, even before we get to the reveal, she's the one who jumps Doll and kills her in the dark tunnel. But the way that she's drawn when she jumps Doll is so goofy. Like, it's just like a silhouette of eyes and a mouth. You don't even see the hint that there's some other face back there. It's just like the vague shape of a face. It's just goofy. It doesn't give a FNAF jump scare effect in the slightest. It's so weird. But the worst offender, again, like I said, it even started bad there, but the worst offender of the issue with Sin is when she ditches the spacesuit and reveals her true form wearing Tessa's corpse. Not only do I still not know what the heck is going on in that panel, like I said, I genuinely don't know. But Sin doesn't even do anything. Like, maybe this weird grumbly, squishy thing is supposed to be her eating Doll's core and killing Doll for good, but that's not clear. That we never see that. And then when she shows up in the show, she attacks En and Uzi, actually like knocks En unconscious, almost makes you think he's dead for a minute before dragging them into the hole. And it's a lot more desperation from Uzi because of that. But in this one, she shows up and goes, ha, gets snuck upon, but I didn't really do anything, and you're not really shocked to see me, so goodbye. And then she just backwards jumps into the hole and then drags him down. It's so awkward. It's just awkward, man. This is supposed to be the big horrifying payoff of what the different, teasers have been setting up, that the solver is here, that it had a connection to Tessa and all this. That's supposed to be the big twist. Holy crap, look at this horrifying reveal. And you feel almost nothing. You feel almost nothing when it happens. It's so weird. And because again, not only did this comic make one of the show's biggest issues, pacing, even worse, it muddied one of its greatest strengths, which was the horror. It had some horrifying visuals in the show that have zero impact in the comic. I think that the only comic with worse pacing than this was probably the second issue, that was only because it crammed 2 episodes together. This one is just terrible at pacing from adapting 1 episode. It's terrible. And again, like I said, Liam himself had tunnel vision and focused on that Sinessa reveal so much that he basically rewrote the show around it. It is the pivotal moment of the series, revealing the villain in her horrifying glory. But they remove so much horror and scariness from it that instead of being this big dramatic reveal leading into a cliffhanger, the comic just kind of meanders into the setup for its final issue, because the next one is the final issue, and it just kind of meanders into the setup. I feel like I was getting genuinely angry talking about that, because it's my favorite episode. It's so frustrating. It really is. They could have done it so much better. And bringing in another artist was like, ooh, that could be cool. Let's see how they interpret it. But it's crap. It feels so heavily censored. Like, it forgets what the show is. The show is incredibly violent, especially in its last episodes. Like, yes, most of it is oil against drones, but as soon as, we really get into the solver and Sin and all of that, that's when it gets super violent. The whole point is that it's earned the chance to use that violence. It's built up all this mystery, all this knowledge about the villain, all the backstory, all what happened to the humans. It's built this all up, and now it gets the payoff of showing how gross and disgusting and horrifying it is. But we don't get that payoff at all. We don't get it. It's incredibly frustrating, and especially because there's only 1 issue left. So the fact that it just meandered into the setup for the finale is really disappointing. Okay, honestly, as you can tell, I was getting really mad in that last section. Finding something nice to say about this comic is a little rough, but I want to end this on some positive note, so I'll compliment something. I will find a way to compliment this comic. So before I say my compliment, I want to be clear. I am a huge fan of the show don't tell method of storytelling, but I'll also admit that Murder Drones, the show, does this to a fault. The comic, however, despite its terrible pacing in this issue, actually adds a bit of dialogue to give more little moments to characters and actually try to add some more context to scenes. And some of these, here we go. I wrote a couple down here. Some of these little moments include giving more to Mitchell the intern to say. Makes more sense that he'd actually have reactionary things to say to the awful, nightmarish horrors that are taking place around him. Because in the show, he barely says anything. Doesn't say a word to Yeva, barely reacts at first when he sees the hologram and he knows something's going on, or even like the big reveal. He barely says anything. But this one, he actually has little moments. When he sees the destruction of the church, he goes, oh, holy crap. Or when he sees Yeva and he finds her, he goes, yeah, I think this is right. Please come with me. And stuff like that. It adds a little bit of extra character to this little one-off that became a fan favorite. I like that. I think that having a character actually react to the horrors around him is a good thing. That's one of the complaints I had about, thinking of FNAF again, Secret of the Mimic. Arnold has some great reaction stuff when they let him do it, but I don't think there's enough of it. I need to have him more gasp or what the heck is that kind of like horrifying reactions to these nightmare animatronics that are approaching him. And I'm glad, though, in this comic that Mitchell had some reactions to the horror around him. But I also like another thing. Moving on to the next one, I wrote 4 of these down. This is number 2. Sin saying destroying Earth was fun, right? To end after he has his little one-panel flashback to the destruction of Earth. Because it leads really nicely into then, well, thanks for clearing the way on this planet too. Because not only do we kind of need the clarification because you didn't actually show what was going on in that panel, it was just a random red panel that could have been on Copper 9 for all we know, because the buildings look exactly the same with how they're drawn. Not only does it add the context to that panel to make it clear, but I think the whole destroying Earth was fun, right? Feels very in character for Sin and actually works really well, especially in the way that she's talking to En here. The third thing that I wrote down was a little joke between that Nori has during the big fight with her and En versus possessed Uzi, where it's like Uzi and En specifically are clashing, and Nori stands there and she goes, do I have to separate you two? It's a really funny joke. Like the kids, play nice. Do I have to separate you? And also the fact that she does not want them dating, and so she wants to just separate them that way. I think that's a fun joke. It adds more to, the this is Uzi's mom humor of Nori, and I think that is a good thing. I think that works actually really well. And then the last one I also liked here that they added for dialogue was also during the fight, where mid-fight, En is begging Uzi to fight the possession. Say like, I know you're still in there, fight it, Uzi, that kind of thing. It's good. It shows that, yes, he's fighting, but it shows why he's not going, full savage trying to destroy her, because we know he's a really competent fighter and he's super strong. He doesn't want to hurt her. He loves her. He wants her to be saved. And because he doesn't have the USB, he's fighting for her to save herself, which is very good. It's something that makes a lot of sense. All of those that I'm talking about there add to the characters that are saying it. And it adds these little moments that are actually really fun and enhance the scene a bit more. So again, the pacing issues and the sometimes full cutting of scenes is incredibly frustrating, but the little bits that they're adding here, I think are actually pretty solid. I'm always a fan of little character moments. Like one of my favorite scenes in Murder Drones is the sky therapy scene with Uzi and En. It's just two characters talking to each other. I love that. I think that character moments are really, really important in a show. So giving everyone more dialogue here and more dialogue to talk to each other, I think is really good. I think that's actually super solid. Again, it adds, like I said, adds to the depth of the characters. Plus, this is a paper format version of the story. Even if there are images, it's still meant to be read. So it inherently needs, in my opinion, anything that's more paper-based, whether it's a comic or a novel, needs more dialogue and more text than an animation format, because animation, has the full movement and visuals that it can go with, while you're a lot more limited when it's printed on paper. So I fully believe that it needs more dialogue and text if you're doing a paper version. So I think that adding more bits and pieces here and there works really well. So yeah, like I said, I was definitely disappointed by this comic, which is such a shame because Master Destruction is my favorite episode, and this comic is such a watered down, chopped up version of it. It was such a good episode, and this is just so not a good comic. especially because the last couple issues I thought, hey, the writing actually might be getting on track with the show. This is pretty good. At least in some parts of it, that part's really nice. And they didn't screw over V in the last couple ones, which is really good. But I'm back to shaking my head. And honestly, like, I almost feel bad for the timing with the comic here, because it makes me appreciate that short we got from Glitch recently, the Murder Drone special, Meet Jay, because that was great. I love that. I reacted to that. I thought it was awesome. It's so good at expanding the characters. It really gave me hope that we'll see, you know, more expanding character depth, maybe even more story gaps filled in by Glitch, by more of these Murder Drone specials, these short episodes. Kind of like I talked about before. I think it can live on well with Toy Story style shorts that just add extra character moments without ruining the overall plot. I think it was a great thing. And then you get the comic and that's adapting the beloved show, and you go, what are they doing here? Because, you know, the Glitch one feels like it was made with love and respect for the series. And it was like, hey, we know you guys said you wanted Jay to have more spotlight and she needed more character development. Here you go. We're going to give you a short dedicated to doing just that. Well, you go to the comic and you're like, this feels like a guy who was given a summary of the show and then he wrote it without watching it. That's how I have felt this whole time. That it feels like this was written by someone who was given a summary, a synopsis of the show, and didn't actually watch it to understand all the characters. I truly believe that that's what we were getting here, and it's incredibly frustrating. But yeah, anyway, next time will be I think it should actually come out soon. They said it was supposed to still come out this month, so we might get it this week. If so, I'll have it up at the start of next week. But the last issue of the Murder Drones graphic novel, issue number 6, which is the finale, which is a lot of action scenes. So I don't really have too much hope for this comic, honestly, and how it's going to adapt it, because that's kind of awkward to adapt for this. But I'm also concerned about Sin scenes, because like I said, they toned down her creepiness and her horror factor so much in this comic that what is going to happen to iconic scenes such as Let Me In and Callback Pain? What's going to happen? Those are horrifying scenes that show how disturbing of a villain the Solver is. Are those even going to happen properly? I doubt it at this point. I don't think this is really going to happen the way it's supposed to be. So they couldn't even let her attack Uzi and N when she made her grand entrance. So what will even happen with those scenes? I'm incredibly nervous about how it's going to wrap up, but it is almost over, which is it's such a shame. I was so excited when they announced this. I backed them with like the second highest tier for their Kickstarter and a backer kit, whichever one it was. And I'm still excited to get the merch. I think the merch is going to be great. I'm going to wear that Camp 98.7 hat everywhere I can. Man, the comic has been a disappointment, which is such a shame. And I think what makes it worse is that any kind of, oh yes, we hear you comments from Oni Press have felt kind of like okay, well, we have to say something, we'll say something. But then after they said it that first time, they're like, we're just going to ignore it going forward. And Glitch hasn't said anything about it. The fact that fans have been very upset with these, and it's been a travesty in how it adapts the show. So very nervous about how it's going to wrap up, but I will definitely talk about it. I've talked about all of them. I love Murder Drones, and I want to talk about it, you know, as a dedicated fan to it. So keep an eye on that. Hopefully that will be coming soon, and I'll talk about it, and I will not get distracted by Splatoon Raiders and actually get the video done this time around. Yeah, so that'll be next time. But anyway, that's it for this video. Hope you all enjoyed it. Please drop a like and comment down below if you did, or subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you all on the next one. Bye, guys!